organization is or should be responsible for engaging with candidates? Number two, how are people actually engaging with the candidate pool? And finally, what technology they're using right now to engage with the candidate pool. I'm going to look at each one of these individually. So we asked who in your organization is responsible for recruitment, not so much who's involved in the process, because lots of people are, but where does the responsibility lie? Who's accountable for the success of the process? About 75% said that the HR department holds this responsibility. 40% said that the internal recruitment department were responsible. Just over 40% said hiring managers, and another 30% said company executives were responsible. And then you've got 45% said that recruitment firms, companies like us, were accountable. 63% of companies said that they have an internal recruitment team, which I have to say was higher than I expected, as the vast majority of small to medium-sized organizations don't have an internal recruitment team, but that was the result. I thought that was kind of interesting that 63% have an internal recruitment team, but only 40% said that the responsibility lies with the team, which could be interesting. I think the main message, anyway, from this is that recruitment is largely seen as the human resources department's challenge, but in reality, you've got everybody involved. There's a shared responsibility in organizations for recruitment. We asked people to rank how effective their internal recruitment strategy was on different key elements, such as quality of applications, the number of applications that they get, building their brand recognition, affecting company turnover. The recruitment strategy was having the most positive effect on the company's staff turnover, or more to the point, hiring decisions were generally correct and the people that you're hiring are sticking, which is great. At the other end of the spectrum, the strategy is having the least effect on the number and quality of candidates that are applying. So getting quality candidates is clearly the biggest challenge, which makes sense. We asked what technology you're using to support the candidate application process, really as a test to see is technology just being used, period. About 1/3 use an applicant tracking system internally. Half are accepting digital profiles versus traditional resumes. So for example, if someone sends an email in response to a job ad and they include a link to their digital profile, which could be on LinkedIn, for example, or it could be on their own personal website, which we're seeing more people doing. About half of companies have a facility set up on their website to allow people to attach their LinkedIn profile when they're going through the standard application process. We asked if your social media strategy was integrated with your own website, and 35% said yes it is. And what does that mean? Basically it means that you could see the company's YouTube videos from their own website, you could see their LinkedIn and their Twitter feed on their own website, or is it separate? In this instance, 35% saying that it's integrated. 40% say that their website is mobile friendly, which is great, and that shows the need to make your website mobile friendly if you haven't already done that. So overall, things are pointing towards the fact that some companies know that they need to make it as easy as possible to apply, and that technology can help with that. But it also says that actually the majority of companies are not or don't know if they're using technology to support their recruitment function. Excuse me. So how are employers actually engaging with the candidate pool? So we asked which channels you're using to recruit. 60% are using recruitment agencies. You've got between 40 to 50% using job boards, so generic job boards and niche job boards. Schools, associations, general advertising through the mainstream media, all at around 40 to 50%, so common amounts there. The only one that really stood out for me when I looked at it was 20%, a very relatively low number, 20% of companies using social media as a channel to recruit. We asked where you have or whether you have a dedicated career page. 35% said that they don't have a dedicated career page at all. You've got about the same amount saying that they have one on their own website. Under 20% have one on LinkedIn, and then it drops off dramatically, and almost negligible amounts have career pages on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, etc. Almost 20% don't know if they have a dedicated careers page, which probably says something about how joined up the recruitment strategy can be in a company. We asked how much of a following does your company have in social media. 31% said that they have more than 1,000 followers, 15% said they're between 500 and 1,000, and about a quarter of employers saying that they have somewhere between 100 and 500 followers. Most people see the need to grow their social media presence for recruitment purposes, with over 70% wanting to do that through LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So, kind of interesting picture. You've got most companies saying that they do not use social media to recruit, but at the same time saying, yes, we do have a social media presence, and saying we clearly see the need to increase our presence for recruitment purposes. So all good, positive stuff. So I want to make a point here, something interesting. So we saw from the previous slide that about 70% of companies have a presence through social media. 70% want to grow their presence for the purposes of recruitment. But there is a challenge here. We asked, if you could only choose one reason for growing your social media or online following, what would it be that best describes the reason? And number one reason was to raise brand awareness of the company's product or service, which makes sense. At the end of the day, the company is there to sell their product. Number two was to raise their awareness as an employer of choice. And I should point out there was about a 10-point difference between the two here. So companies are clearly trying to do both simultaneously. We also asked to list all of the reasons why you would want to increase your social following, and you can see the results here. I won't go through them all, but the short answer is there's actually lots of reasons why you'd want to increase your social media presence. Excuse me. That's driving sales, getting customer feedback, creating leads through increased traffic, etc. So lots of reasons. But the question from a recruitment point of view, is recruitment specifically being lost amongst all of these things? Is the network that you have actually made up of consumers, or is it made up of candidates? And that kind of leads me on to what we would call the digital dilemma. And I think everybody would say the technology and social media have given us lots of advantages, like being able to search and find people more easily, but it's also causing lots of challenges. So to start with the basic challenge recruiters are facing, we asked what factors hinder the success of your organization's strategy. And you've got the usual problems of there just not being enough good applications. But if you look at the next issue, it's the fact that they're looking for very niche skill sets, which is becoming more and more common. And the big question is, how do we access these niche skill sets? Further down, you start to see things like just the cost of advertising, there being too many job boards to choose from, which is something we hear. 77% also then said that they were concerned with how social media can have a negative impact on people's perception of their brand, and that's kind of obvious. But I thought what was interesting, you've got 64% saying that they're concerned with how social media channels will negatively affect their ability to recruit. So, in summary, you've got pressure to find skill sets, some frustration at the avenues that you can use, like job boards, but then you've also got a general sense of fear or trepidation about social media and how it might affect, in a negative way, the company's brand and the company's ability to actually hire people. So how about your company's network? So we're defining network here, all of the people that you can communicate with. So when we ask employers when we talk to them about this, and we say, like, do you have a good network? Do you have a good social media following? Frequently they will say, yes, we do, we're very well networked. But we asked in the survey, who is actually in your network, and we got this response. So the total circle represents your total company network. The majority, over 60% of the network, is actually potential or current customers of the company's product or service. And then the remainder is candidates. And then we went on to ask, what proportion of the candidates were actually of interest, i.e. are they quality people, do they have the right kinds of experience? And the answer we got was about 2/3 of the candidates are of poor quality. So in total, that means that in the total network, only about 10% of the people are actually useful candidates. So specifically from employers in different industries or sectors, we asked the same question, and you kind of get the same answer across industries. The construction industry actually said that they had the highest proportion of candidates in their network at 47%, which is great, but still only about 1/3 of those being of any practical use. So you can see the detail on multiple different industries and sectors in the report itself. But then you add to that, we also asked the employers to rate the quality of their own recruitment strategy or process, and most of them actually rated it as being poor to mediocre. So adding to the whole issue of digital recruitment, you just got a general sense that it isn't as good as it could be. So just changing gears a little bit, or kind of using an example more to the point, excuse me, if you think about a company like Johnson & Johnson, they're an outstanding organization. They have a huge online presence, and they've got a huge commitment to the use of social media, and they're one of the most followed companies online. They have an excellent record of engaging with their network. But an interesting question is, who is actually in the network for Johnson & Johnson? Is it new parents, i.e. consumers of their products, or is it instrumentation engineers, i.e. the kind of people that they would probably want to recruit at times? And I think I don't know for a fact, but just as an example, if Johnson & Johnson are like most other companies, they have a mix of the two, but it's probably dominated by consumers. It's probably about 2/3 or even more of the total network. And the challenge, of course, is that when Johnson & Johnson are recruiting, they're using, and if they're using the same channels to attract candidates, i.e. through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they're mainly communicating with parents and not instrumentation engineers, for example. So the next thing is to talk about engagement, why it's important, what it actually means, and how you could potentially do it. So if you were to think about the total candidate marketplace for instrumentation engineers, just as an example, and let's say for the sake of argument, there's only 100 instrumentation engineers actually in existence. How many of those candidates are actively looking for a job at any one time? And the answer from our experience is around 10% of candidates at any skill set are actively looking. And that means that the remaining 90% are what we call as passive candidates. They might be passively looking, as in they might be interested if the right thing came along. And I'd actually argue that virtually everybody is passively interested in opportunities all of the time. But anyway, only 10% are active, i.e. posting their resume on job boards, applying to jobs. And that's why the passive candidate pool is actually the holy grail of recruitment. The problem, of course, is that you don't know which 10% are going to become active next. So really what this means is you have to somehow engage with as many of them, and virtually all of them, as much as you can, for as long as you can, so that when that candidate, whoever it might be, decides to move, they actually come to you. So what does it actually mean to engage with candidates? Well, think about how companies engage their target customers, and Starbucks is a brilliant example of this. So Starbucks customers are so engaged that some of them actually feel like that they actually run Starbucks. They have a tool called My Starbucks Idea, where they request ideas from their customers, and then they actually go ahead and implement them, which is obviously the most important thing. And they've done that with hundreds of ideas in their branches. So the customers actually feel so connected, they feel they're part of the organization, they're really loyal, and they're really committed. So from our point of view at Hays, as a recruitment organization, we do something similar. We produce a lot of really, really high quality content for candidates as well as hiring managers. So for example, even something like this webinar. Recently we produced a report called The DNA of a CFO, and it was telling people, how can you make it to the top of your profession as an accountant? And people really engage with that kind of content, they share it with their friends, they ask us questions, and over time that individual builds a trustworthy relationship with Hays. And that really is the key to recruiting passive candidates. If you can engage with people, they will come to you when they actually decide to move jobs. So we asked, how often are you engaging with candidates with content? And the majority of employers never do or very seldom do. And then, of course, you've got the question of how do I actually engage with them, which I'll look at on the next slide. So if you go back to the example of Johnson & Johnson again, engagement is about getting a dialogue going with your network, a two-way communication. And when Johnson & Johnson are tweeting or sharing or commenting and talking with their network, what is it that is the topic of conversation? Is it about instrumentation schematics, or, for example, is it about baby powder? And I can tell you it would and should be dominated by the products that Johnson & Johnson produce. The baby powder conversation will definitely engage the new parents, but it won't engage the instrumentation engineer unless he's a new parent, but that won't actually help Johnson & Johnson actually recruit him. So just to give a summary here, when we say the digital dilemma, we're talking about the challenges that I've just explained. And I think to have a high quality recruitment strategy, you need to meet these following elements. So I'll just read this out, and this is almost like our definition of what we mean to have a good recruitment strategy. So to recruit in a digital space, it requires a long-term, high quality and quantity employer brand content strategy. It's got to be targeted at the right audience. It's got to be targeted at passive and active candidates. It has to be separate from the product and service related messages, and it's got to be through the right channels. So there's a lot to get right. But I think if you had all of those elements, then you would have an excellent strategy in place. We get asked about this a lot by our clients. So to help our clients with that challenge that I've just explained, we've developed a service offering ourselves. We call it the Employer Brand Accelerator. And the easiest way to explain this in a quick, painless way is to kind of use an example. So if we have a client with multiple roles to fill, or say a very hard role to fill, we create a digital recruitment campaign using our client's branding. So we highlight our client as a featured employer on our website. We produce a video where Hayes endorses that client as an employer of choice. We distribute the message through our digital channels and across our network, but we use our client's branding. And in some instances, we've actually created videos for our client that explains their value proposition, or basically why they're such a great place to work, which they can then use themselves for whatever purposes they like in the future. And the feedback we've had since we've been doing this for about a year now, on these campaigns has been outstanding. We get a lot of attention from the target candidate pool, which is the key point. We amazingly have 100% fill rate on all of the roles that we've worked like this. So it's a good thing to consider if you've got hard to fill jobs or if you've got multiple roles that you're trying to look at the same time. So we've talked about how you can get your message out in front of the right people and how to get noticed. But once you have a candidate that you've identified as somebody that you'd like to engage with and actually hire, how do you ensure that what you're offering is likely to be accepted? So like I said earlier, it's all about salary or benefits. Does career progression come in? And how about the reputation or the culture of the organization? So we wanted to come up with some definitive answers on what candidates are actually looking for and how much weight they give to different elements of an opportunity. So we conducted some in-depth research, and I can just quickly go through some of the highlight results here. So I'll start off with this just to set the context. If you're looking for people, even in an area that has a skill shortage, there is some good news. And the good news, to some extent, depends on what perspective you have, is that the majority of people are not actively satisfied in their current role. Only 48% say they're satisfied or very satisfied, and the rest, 52%, are either not satisfied or feel neutral towards their job. We asked if you're currently considering leaving your current role. Only 22% said that they're unlikely to consider leaving. 54% said they're likely to consider leaving. They are likely to consider leaving. And 24% feel neutral, which I think means if the right opportunity came along, they'd probably consider it. So in other words, 78% are open to opportunities. So the short version here, excuse me, sorry about the coughing. So the short version here is that people are open to moving, which is encouraging if you're hiring, but obviously it stresses the importance of knowing what it is that you're actually selling. And the other side, as I said, the other perspective, it also stresses the importance of actually keeping very close to your existing staff and ensuring that their needs are being met, because it is easy for people to leave. So we wanted to see how much of an influence different elements of an opportunity have on a person's decision when they're evaluating an opportunity. We identified 4 key elements of any opportunity, and they are, number 1, compensation, i.e. salary. Number 2, benefits, including health, dental, car allowance, and we actually included vacation time in benefits, which we'll come back to in a minute. Number 3, career growth opportunity that's available. And then finally, you've got the company's reputation or the company culture, like what it's like to be there, what it's like to work there. So when reviewing a new job opportunity, how much of an influence does each element have? The most influential element is compensation. That accounts for 45% of the decision, which is not too surprising. I have to say, we rarely see people not putting compensation at the top of their list of questions when they're looking at a job offer. The other elements then, benefits, career growth, and company reputation make up the rest, and it accounts for 55% of the decision. So despite the fact that compensation is the single most influential, the other ones actually add up to more, which again makes sense. If you're not keen on the benefits package, the growth opportunity, and the reputation, it really doesn't matter how much the salary is, or maybe if you take the offer based on money alone, the other elements are not satisfactory. Well, my guess would be things probably won't work out so well in that instance. If we look at how an individual makes a decision to stay now or go, this is how those key elements influence them. So this is to explain this. This is you're currently in a job and you're considering, will I leave or not? And compensation becomes less important here. It drops from 45% to 40%. And the company culture increases by a corresponding amount from 16% to almost 21%. So why is this? And I think there's a few pretty obvious reasons. Number one, it's easier to stay in an organization than it is to move. Number two, familiarity, personal relationships that you develop at work count and they make a difference. I think also the fear of the unknown going to a new role can be off-putting. And then finally, when you're moving jobs, money and benefits sometimes can be the only thing that you can be absolutely sure of will actually turn out as promised. I was offered this amount of money, that is what you will get paid. The company reputation, you really won't know whether that's true until you've actually started work. Excuse me. So when hiring a new person, salary is obviously really, really important to get them to accept. You've got to have a good offering on benefits, career growth, and company culture to complete the deal. But after they start, company culture, potential to progress, etc., becomes a lot more important very, very quickly. So I'm going to just look at each of these key elements now, and we'll start off with compensation. So we wanted to get a little bit deeper into compensation and test how valuable it is and whether people are willing to give up some level of compensation for improvements in other areas. 40% of people said that they would take a reduction in their salary if they found an opportunity that had the right elements of benefits, career progression, and company culture. 60% said that they would take up to a 20% cut in their base salary if they were given the opportunity to potentially earn more in total through earning performance-related bonuses. And the performance-related bonuses are the #1 required benefit by people. It's what people want the most. So people are willing to accept some risk to their earnings if there is potential upside. And I think that's interesting to an organization because you could potentially reduce base salary costs and invest that money in an improvement in productivity driven by performance-related bonuses. And I think the idea of those kind of bonuses can be a really effective tool, but it's the setting of the measurable objectives in the first place that's the most important element to ensuring you get a good return on that investment. Otherwise, you just end up paying bonuses and you're not really sure what result you got from it. Okay, we'll look at benefits next. Similar questions here. So we asked what you would be willing to give up for return for other things. So 60% said that they would take a reduction in compensation, seniority level, and benefits if they got 2 more weeks of vacation added on to what they currently have. I think I would probably do that. 75% of people said they're unwilling to accept a new role with less vacation, which matches up with what we see every day in our jobs. It's very, very rare that you can get somebody to accept the role with less vacation. It virtually trumps everything else. 45% said they're unwilling to give up flexible work options, which means that is very important to people, but interestingly not nearly as important as vacation time. We actually asked the same question, we don't have it here, but we asked the same question about health and dental benefits, and 60% said that they would be unwilling to give up a reduction in their benefits plan. And you can see it there, 75% said that they would be unwilling to give up vacation. So it would appear that vacation is actually the most influential benefit of them all. In another survey, we actually asked which benefits employers most wanted to add, and the answer was flexible work options like working from home or flexi hours in response to the need for work-life balance that was coming from their staff. But that's despite the fact that lots of clients actually that we speak to say they still feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of the flexible work options because they feel that it can affect productivity. So I would suggest that an increase in vacation time can be a more impactful way of improving work-life balance. Plus, it means that when people are not on vacation, you can rely on the fact that they will be in the office during those core office hours. Okay, finally, on this one, we'll look at career progression. So we asked people about their career aspirations. 60% of people said that they have aspirations to achieve a mid to senior level management role, which is excellent, but 75% of companies actually said that they do not have a succession plan in place, which is interesting. And I think it says that there's a huge opportunity for a company that can actually show their succession plan to potential hires, and even more importantly, to show it to existing employees and be able to show them here are the future opportunities in the organization. If you did that as an employer, you would definitely stand out because the majority of companies, as we can see here, don't have a succession plan. So in any event, the key message here is that people are ambitious, they want to see progression in their career. But then there's an interesting statistic here, which is 60% of professionals said that they would take a step down in terms of seniority level for a role that had the right compensation, benefits, and company culture. And if people are so ambitious for progression, why would they equally be willing to take a step down for other things? Which I'm going to come back to in a moment if you just kind of hold that thought. We asked, what is the most important element of your career progression? And the overwhelming majority said that career progression to them was about professional development, almost 90%, as opposed to career status. We asked, what's the most important factor in your professional development? And a number one choice was new challenges. The other things that they could have chosen from were things like professional accreditation, in-house learning, external training courses, etc. But professional development was, people saw it as really being dominated as new challenges. And I think that to me means learning new things, being given new opportunities, being challenged in your day-to-day. And if you go back to my question at the start of this slide about if people are ambitious for their own careers, why would they then be willing to take a step down? And I think my belief is that people are more interested in new challenges and change and variety than they are in some of the traditional career progression elements or simply getting more senior job titles. And as an employer, there's an opportunity for you here in this point. So traditionally, we think about career progression as promotion and the things that go along with it. So you get an increased level of status, you get a new job title, you get more responsibility potentially, and hopefully you get more money. But an alternative, and I think very healthy view, is that career progression should be dominated by change and variety. So change in a role or a department or a location or a division, introducing variety to people's jobs, like using job swaps within the same department, or giving them new challenges and new projects. For example, we have some clients that actually use this to great effect. They rotate people into new roles proactively. So for example, taking somebody from accounts payable and retraining them into the payroll department, not because the person asked, but because you think it's a good idea to keep the person engaged. I think when you do something like that, that will keep that individual in the company motivated with the organization longer than just a new promotion or change of job title will. And I think overall, if you look at it like that, people will be more motivated, retention improves, succession planning becomes easier, and potentially you could do it all with fewer salary increases, which can be attractive as an employer. Okay, so we'll just take a change of direction now, and we're going to look at things from the candidate's perspective. As we say, every hiring manager can be a candidate at the same time. And I said at the start I'd address some insights into how to become a more attractive candidate, or how to become a hotter candidate in the digital world and attract some attention. So despite candidate shortages, there's still actually a lot of competition when it comes to making yourself stand out and finding the right opportunity. And employers are looking for, as we said earlier, niche experiences. So you really need to raise your profile to draw attention to the expertise that you actually have. So here's 3 key steps to being seen as a strong candidate. Building a searchable and findable digital profile, creating a brand that's consistent from digital to print to in-person, and finally, you need to get noticed. So I'm just going to take these really quickly, one at a time. So first of all, you need a strong digital profile. And the first step any employer or recruitment company will do is search for your profile online when they receive you as an application. And the key with all of this is optimizing your profile for SEO, or search engine optimization, so you're actually found. But it's also writing your profile in a way that's selling yourself and your key accomplishments. And I've got 4 key kind of practical steps that you can take here. Number 1, optimize your social media profile. So you've got to make sure you're using lots of keywords from your specialism or your area of expertise that will help you come up on the first page in a search result. Secondly, you have to have a good spread of your profile across as many channels as you can, really. So for example, using job boards, association websites, social media, etc. Think about where your resume is or where your profile is. Are they all up to date? Are they all consistent? And make sure you're putting your profile in the places where you think your target employers are probably looking. Thirdly, your content's got to be current, it's got to be fresh. Aggregators, so job board aggregators where they're scraping candidate profiles, they're updated by the minute. So for example, if you are in a job hunt, you've got to keep your information fresh and current so that you're coming up in searches. And then finally, good idea is just to Google yourself and see what actually comes up. Is it obvious that you're seen as an expert in your field? Could you do something like write a few simple blogs, and what difference would that make? Would that differentiate you compared to other candidates? I think it probably would. Okay, secondly, as I said, you need to create a consistent and high quality experience for your potential employer. As you go through the process, the employer should get to know more and more about you, but what's important is that what they learn is consistent. And consistency really is the key here. And some employers are very diligent, so ensure that all of the information is accurate and it paints the correct picture of you. So again, a couple of key points here. Digital is a great way to be able to show your experiences holistically. So this is where you can paint like a full picture of yourself, and you can use social media, for example, that could showcase a timeline of your career, or you could showcase all of your accomplishments. Secondly, when you're actually preparing your resume or your candidate profile, that should be a lot more targeted, and it should only focus on the key aspects of your experience that relate to that particular role that you're interested in applying for. Employers do not read lots and lots of pages, so you've got to be very specific. And then finally, when meeting your prospective employer in person, you've got to make sure to demonstrate that what they have read is actually the case. You have to remember to stay on message and remember to sell why you are a match for this particular role. Some things never change. Okay, and then finally, you want to stand out, and it really is in your hands to get noticed. A couple of key points here. Number 1, you should connect online with target employers or influencers that you think would be valuable to your network and to your progression. Secondly, good idea to follow the brands of the target organizations that you have, including recruitment agencies, of course, because they have large ranges of opportunities. Excellent idea to actually engage with the content coming from these organizations and influencers. For example, at Hayes, we notice when candidates have a voice, like when they engage with us or they comment on our content or they request more information. And I would suggest any recruiter would notice you more by actually engaging with them. And then finally, you've got to be proactive. So sending out emails, sending in-mails through social media, connecting with people, calling people you can't forget about doing, meeting people face-to-face as much as you can, registering with recruitment companies. You've got to do all of that stuff. You have to be proactive because the opportunity will not just come to you. Okay, so we're almost done. The final thing I'll just add on here, we have our salary guide for 2016. It's due out, I think, in December. It's a comprehensive guide. salaries across industries and locations in Canada, and you can request a copy at hayes.ca/salary guide. And as part of the guide, we always take the opportunity to gauge the health and confidence of the economy and jobs market in Canada, and I can share a couple of insights with you now. So this information is from employers and hiring managers across all sectors in Canada. In the coming year, this is how they see it. So 57% of people are saying that business activity levels will increase in the coming year. 30% expect it to remain static, so not too bad. Only 25% see the economy in general as strengthening in the coming year. 53% expect it to remain static. On salaries, over 50% of employers are planning on offering a less than 3% increase. And actually, we had seen a move towards more than 3% increases over the last few years, but that seems to have changed this year, and it's gone back to a little bit more of a conservative approach. And then 34% are planning on increasing permanent headcount, 50% planning on holding things steady. So overall, I can tell you that it paints a more conservative view compared to the last few years that we had seen, and I think we're of the belief that's being driven by Alberta's economy. So in the guide, you can actually show the trends. We show all of the trends in all of these areas over the last few years, and we'll show a provincial breakdown to show how much of an impact different provinces, and in particular, how much of an impact Alberta is having. Okay, so I'll just leave you with the key points from today's session. Employers are using the same network to build awareness of their products and to recruit, and that can cause problems. There's a clear awareness amongst employers of the need to embrace social media as a recruitment tool. Employers are really just using job opportunities as the thing to engage with candidates and to build their employer brand, and our view is that you need to do more than that. And finally, what's important to top candidates, and candidates in general, isn't necessarily the most obvious thing, so you really need to think about your offering and is it appealing to the things that people actually want. I have a couple of key recommendations if you're planning your own recruitment strategy, and very simply, I would say, number one, you've got to define your employer value proposition. Are you clear about why people should come to work with your organization, and is it true? Secondly, you've got to develop a content plan to be able to engage with those passive candidates in the medium to long. And finally, you have to build a network of your candidate target audience, and you can only really do that nowadays with the use and support of digital tools. Okay, so that's the end of the key messages that we wanted to share today. So thank you very much for dialing in and listening. I hope you found it useful, and you got a couple of good ideas from it. We have a couple of minutes now to spare to answer any questions that you might have. If you have a question, you can just type it into the. If you can just type it into the chat box. Excuse me. You can type it into the chat box at the top, and then we will answer as many of them as we can. And I have a couple of people on the line with me. We've got Thea Watson, our marketing director, who's responsible for all of these reports that we create. So she can answer questions that I'm not able to. We've got a couple of people from some of our offices who can help out with some questions too. So as we're waiting for some questions to come in, you can request copies of the reports that I've just explained or presented to you. You can go to hayes.ca/research. And as I said at the start, we've multiple reports that you can look at, and also, as I said, we've got the salary guide coming out in the next couple of months, and you can request a copy of that too. And finally, I believe that we've recorded the webinar, and we'll have it posted on our YouTube channel, so you can go in if you're looking for copies of the slides. We can do better than that. You can actually get the copies of the slides and the audio, which you can turn off if you don't want to listen to it. Okay, so we'll see what questions we have. So first question is, excuse me, what do you predict the outlook for the 2016 job market to be? Is it a candidate or employer market? Well, the easy answer to that is just to go back a couple of slides and see what people are saying. Overall, I think that the job market in Canada, I've been asked this a lot recently, overall the job market is, I kind of classify it as okay. But because Canada really is made up of different provincial economies, it's difficult to say that it's the same everywhere because it isn't. There's a huge difference that we can see in Alberta, particularly in Calgary actually, compared to when we look at Toronto or Vancouver. The markets in Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal are still very good. Companies are growing, they're hiring, and they're expecting to continue to grow. In Alberta, it's so dominated by the price of oil. We just have to wait and see what happens with that. If it returns, then we'll see an improvement in the job market, but I don't think anything else is going to have as much of an influence on the job market next year. Is it a candidate or employer market? That really depends on the industry that you're working in. If you're a mobile developer in the IT space, then it's very much a candidate-driven marketplace. They can choose where they're going to go. If you're working in some areas of manufacturing, you might struggle to find a job. It's probably more of an employer-driven market. But then, even within industries, you take manufacturing, if you're a process engineer or a procurement professional, you can probably add value, reduce costs, improve efficiencies in a manufacturing company, and that makes you very, very attractive. So you can't even cover one industry. It's really looking at the detail under the surface. Okay, we'll see what else we have. Does digital recruitment reduce the importance of references and networking-based job search? Does digital recruitment reduce the importance of reference? Okay, so I think what they're saying is the digital recruitment take away from the idea of person-to-person networking or being referred to different jobs? I think that's what the question is. I don't think it does. I think you have to do both. I think if you're completely reliant on your digital presence, you're missing out on good candidates and you're missing out on good opportunities. You have to be personally involved. You have to be speaking to people. But to have coverage across, a full coverage across an entire area or entire marketplace, digital is a very, very efficient way of doing that. You can keep in touch with a lot of people regularly in a far more efficient way than you could ever do it on a one-to-one basis. So I think really you've got to do both of those things. Is small business using digital for recruitment? I would say they're not really. I think most small organizations don't have dedicated recruitment people, and they certainly don't have the resource to be able to dedicate to running a digital campaign for them. So I think it's difficult. And the most common thing we hear from small to medium-sized companies is, how are we meant to raise our profile in the marketplace that's dominated not by so many employers, but just dominated by noise? There's so much noise online. How do we get ourselves noticed? And that really is the thing I was talking about, that we help small to medium-sized companies with that product, the Employer Brand Accelerator, where we use a company's branding, but we put it through our network of the right candidates, and it can really help. It's basically outsourcing the problem to us. Next question, let's see. I'm wondering what the average length of time is between advertising an opening and finding a suitable candidate. What's the average? I would say, again, it depends on the role, it depends where you're recruiting, it depends on how hard it is to find people like that. I would say right now the average is somewhere around 5-6 weeks from when you advertise to when you should have the job filled. At least that's what we would expect on the work that we do with our clients. But like I said, there's no one size fits all. Final question, I think we'll just take one more. Next is, how prevalent are video tools right now, so using Skype or any other products in screening potential candidates? It's definitely being used, but it's not something that we're seeing a lot of. I think where there's volume recruitment going on in an organization, we see the companies using video tools, we use them ourselves. When we're starting to see the use of recorded videos, so actually recording pre-recorded questions, and an individual is answering those questions at home, recording their answers, and then the employer is screening that candidate by actually looking at the responses, which is completely different. We hadn't seen that a couple of years ago. We use that ourselves in some instances, and it's really effective and a very efficient thing to do. So I think that will just continue to be used, and the technology is far better now. You can get very high quality video calls and interviews, and it just saves a huge amount of time. All things said though, there's no substitute for actually meeting somebody face to face. So, okay. I think that is probably it. Okay, so we're pretty much exactly on time. That's everything for today. I just wanted to say thank you very much for everybody who's dialed in. I know we had a large number of people on the call today. Thanks to Taya for producing these reports and everybody who worked on the stuff that I've just presented. And if you have any questions or if we can be of any assistance in any way, you can drop me an email. So it's rowan@hayes.com, and I will respond to you straight away. So thanks very much. Have a good rest of your day.